Marcus, thank you so much for coming on the Mindful Parenting Podcast.
Hunter, it's wonderful. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I'm looking forward to talking to you too, talking about tweens, such a challenging and wonderful and interesting age. But before we get into tweens, I want to know a little bit about you.
Right.
Tweens is such a hard age. I felt this way even about I felt this way especially about the teachers of toddlers. I would look at my daughter's toddler teachers and be like, wow, you want to be with these kids. And then I was briefly a teacher of seventh graders.
hmm
And man, I was only teaching half time and it was like so challenging. I left teaching after that. That was my last year of teaching. So
Yeah.
just curious about you and kind of like how you were raised and kind of what brought you to wanting to focus on tweens and parenting connections with tweens.
I'm smiling because it's just like, why? Why? I'll answer both questions. How was I raised? And then I'll answer why, particularly tweens. So I was born in California. I'm a third culture kid. And for the audience,
Wait,
that
wait,
means,
wait. Yeah, what is that? I don't know what that means. Third
yeah,
culture.
thank you for being gracious. That was just for other podcast hosts. It's just like, oh no, I know, but my audience, no. Third culture is where your passport or the country of which you identify with doesn't necessarily match that of your parents.
Okay. Yeah,
There's so
that
many
makes
different
sense.
variations of it. So you're growing up in a different culture, in a sense. My mom's from the Philippines. My dad's from the Bahamas. They met in Nebraska, and I was born in California.
Okay. This is
Yeah,
the American story for
the
sure.
melting pot. Yeah,
Hmm.
I grew up in California and Alabama, and then California again. My father was in education, right? And they divorced when I was 12, when I moved with my father to the Bahamas. And that's where I grew up, in the Bahamas.
Oh, wow. I bet the Bahamas was incredibly, I mean, A, California is so, so different from Alabama. I'm sure you got
Right.
that right away. But then the Bahamas has got to be incredibly different from both of those too. I mean, you really probably had to learn to adapt.
Hunter, yes, and so and I'm mentioning it now because it is a big part of what I do, but I grew up Seventh-day Adventist. It's a denomination of Christianity, and I served as a missionary. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because when my father was a teacher in the school there, a professor, tertiary education, I grew up in community and I was with wholesome people and then
So
family
yeah,
and friends. And
no
then when I
no
came to,
drinking in Seventh-day Adventists, all vegetarian. That's what I know about it.
yeah, they're mostly vegetarian. My stepmom, who my father, when he married again, she actually owned a vegetarian restaurant. And yeah, they're one of the blue zones in Loma Linda,
Yeah,
if you're
yeah, yeah.
familiar with that study. Yeah. So
Well, there's
that's,
there's con there's some debate about the blue zones. Do you know this?
no, no,
That
no, please.
Okay, so the blue zones for the listener are like these areas around the world that people have very long lives and they study what they eat and lifestyle and things like that. Seventh day Adventists in California is one of those blue zones. But they have discovered that the blue
hmm
zones also correlate to places where people had bad record keeping, where people were not keeping track of when people were born very well.
Yeah. Hmm.
And they think that like I don't know, I've heard now
Uh,
this is not a fact check listener, but like
this is
I
Hunterpedia.
but yeah, I've heard that it's like it may have more to do with bad record keeping,
Bad
like
record keeping.
100 years ago when they didn't know, like they weren't keeping track of when, you know, Donna Maria was born, whatever.
I would say this. So we have Italy, have Okinawa.
Hmm.
They're all places where there's community.
Yeah, yeah,
So
for
yeah,
sure.
there's the way you eat, move, and sleep. But then I think one thing that is lacking with when we're talking about the loneliness epidemic or even our just well-being, mental well-being and so on, is our disconnect from pro-social activities.
Definitely.
And if to tie that into why I do what I do now. So my title is a communication coach for parents of preteens. I studied communication at Oakwood University in Huntsville, Alabama. And I remember Dr. Elliott, she told me the quality of your life is directly related to the quality of your communication. I
Mm.
believe that. Your ability to talk with yourself and your ability to talk and connect with others. I went to South Korea. I say my understanding of the divine expanded. No animosity towards anyone in the church, but just took on new beliefs. Taught in Saudi Arabia, Spain, and Thailand, and so on. And now I'm here with my aging parents, but I have a set of skills, and if this were the long game of something I'm interested in, it is human development.
Hmm.
And Mr. Rogers said if you want to help the kids, you support the parents. So now I'm a communication coach, specifically at that time where they're transitioning from independence to dependent, just understanding what is needed at this developmental stage. So that's why I do what I do, yeah. And I taught fifth graders. The thing is, the whole idea is to stay in the game long enough until I could teach them again as parents, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, did you feel like, I mean, I know for me anyway, one of the big reasons I studied communication styles and methodologies and things like that was because I was, I didn't inherit great communication skills, you know. I could talk to
I read the
people.
book,
I'm
yeah.
I'm a little bit, yeah, okay, I'm a little bit of an extrovert, but I didn't inherit great communication skills.
Yeah.
Did you have a similar experience?
I was personally, and as I was told, I was a good communicator myself.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a teenager, I think this informs a lot of my work too. Being with my father, we were not meant to parent alone, but it was me and him. But I had all my aunties and uncles and so on, big community. I would see stuff that's this is not right. And then later on, when I grew up and understanding, again, more gracious towards him, he's not the best communicator. He has always communicated his care. And I also used to see this in the classroom with the parents that they really do care, but it's just they don't know what's going on at this stage of life. They have their own stories. We are the stories we tell ourselves. So, to answer your question, it wasn't the best, but maybe that is why I was pushed to study communication. I think I'm just interested in people. I really do love people. And I don't love your kids as much as you along with that.
I didn't love those seventh graders as much as their parents loved them. That's for sure. Poor seventh graders.
You know?
One of them is going to be a parent right now and listening to this, and they're going to be like, "Oh man, Miss Clarkfields. I thought she was so nice." They're going to be so disappointed in me.
You know what it is at that age? So fifth and sixth, it's right at the cusp. So like they still have that they're a bit timid of crossing over into middle school. But seventh, eighth, that's when like it really gets awkward. Yeah, yeah. But that fifth and that sixth grade, that's where it's just like, okay, you can still help mold them a bit more
Mm-hmm.
and prepare for what's coming next. And a stitch in time saves nine. If you really establish that trust there, I think you could ride it out through the teenage years. That will be more tumultuous.
And I cut you off earlier. We got sidetracked on Seventh Day Adventists and
So
Blue Zones, but
it's all good.
was being in the Bahamas, was that really different culturally from California, from the United States? What was it like there when you were a
Yeah.
teen?
Yeah. I was speaking with a friend about this the other day. Just personally, my experience growing up, I've always felt as other in the circles I occupy. Because when I'm with my Filipino friends, I don't necessarily look Filipino, black dude with an afro. But then when I'm here in the Bahamas, I have an American accent, maybe like. So I said that either makes or breaks you, and I had to lean more into who I am. It was different, but I think that also taught me the skill of getting in where I fit in. I feel comfortable in the skin I am where I am by meeting people where they are, and then finding the commonality and the intersections of where we are in that moment.
Love all that. That's wonderful. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
So let's try to understand these preteens, right? I think of the
Hey.
tweens. I think of them as sort of 9 to 13. You think of them, you
Hmm.
10 to 14, but like that, this is that age where they're just about to turn teens. They're at the end of childhood. They're transitioning into adulthood. I remember being 10 and feeling like I was at like the peak of my childhood power. Just was like, it was all good. And then, 11, this is all different. But what what's going maybe we can just talk a little bit about like generally developmentally what's going on for kids in this preteen time.
Yeah. I'll put it like this. So Gabor Mate wrote, "Hold on to your child," right? And we know that that's where you hold them close, you're nurturing them, eye to eye, skin to skin, make sure they're seen, safe, secure, and soothed. That's from Dan Siegel. So you're really establishing that relationship there. I like to think of it as maternal energy. But when they transition into independence and they have to go figure out who they are, there's a pushing away, a breaking away. And it could come from their side or your side, meaning you're as the parent. but they have to figure out who they are and their identity. And in that pushing away, you still want to make sure they're seen, soothed, secure, and safe. However, you do it from afar so that they can create that inside themselves. And when I say inside themselves, introspection of understanding who they are. And this is their first time doing that. That's why I call it the first breaking of life. It's through the breakings or transitions that we understand the biggest life question, which is, who are you? That's what I think life is asking us at each step of life. And we figure out who we are. A fixed and a growth mindset looks the same until it's challenged. And that's why all of what I do, I say it is human development. But I'm focusing on this specific time in this phrase because if you help give them empowering stories at this moment, they'll have those skills for when the next breaking comes and when the next breaking comes. So
It's
to
kind
your
of a,
question, yeah, go on.
I was going to say, it's just kind of a paradoxical time, right? Like we are
How
wanting
so?
to, you're saying like kids are pushing away and we're wanting to hold on to them. We're wanting to kind of keep them soothed and safe. So there's a very much a push pull there.
Yeah. We want to keep them safe, yet right now they're being flooded with sensations so that, and you know what? That is for their benefit. They are meant to go out there and take risk. So there's healthy risk and there's non-healthy risk, but they want to test things. They want to try things. So then that's why they are more sensitive. Their emotions, the highs feel higher and the lows feel lower. But it's so that they can test things. It's just they don't know what to trust yet. And what I call it a wall of ice, ICE. The three challenges they have are identity formation. C is collaborative trust. They don't know who to trust at that moment, right? Because the world is a scary place, or it could be if they have that lens. And E is emotional management. Their emotions are all over the place. So then how do we come as, we're also transitioning our roles. We used to be their managers, play dates and everything, food and when you eat. But now we have to be the coach or the guide on the side. So it's everybody's roles are changing with different expectations. And it's all these transitions happening at the same time.
I love that. We used to be their managers and now we're the coach on the side. That's such a perfect description of the changing role as time goes on because yeah, I think I see it as from sort of birth on, right? Like when they're born, we control everything, and then over time, it's that slow process of like you do more and more stuff, and I'm kind of with you and walking beside you rather than doing it for you. It's like that learning ladder, right? Like first I do it for you, then I do it with you, then I watch you do it, and then you do it on your own, right? Like that's how we learn every single thing in life. Is that yeah, I mean, maybe even listening to this podcast, first we do it for them, right? You listen and you say, oh, okay, these people are doing it. And then we do it with you, right? You try things out and then you have successes and you have failures and then we're doing it with you and then you do it on your own, right? Like, but I love that
If I may
analogy.
add,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, in that ladder, it first starts off with observation. So they have to watch us when we model it,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
then when you do it long enough, actually the roles switch themselves because independence is
Yeah.
not the final stage. It's interdependence.
Hmm.
Speaking with you earlier, as I told you, I'm with my aging parents now, and it's you understand how they poured into my life, so I pour back. And that's where there's care and concern for other people.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess independence is kind of like, it's kind of like the American individualist mindsets coming through in the way we talk. Okay, so
Sure.
we're talking about
Yeah.
communication with teens, preteens. What are some of the biggest mistakes that parents are making in our communication with teens? I imagine a lot of it is for us having that difficulty for us transitioning from manager to coach. Yeah, he's nodding a little.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm here. Okay, so let's frame this conversation with a book again. Ellen Galansky's The Breakthrough Years. Have you heard of it?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. So anybody who has adolescents, please pick up this book. And I think it just came out this year or earlier this year. We'll start it off by saying people move towards our expectations, right? We oftentimes call teenagers or adolescents immature, and we would never call a toddler an immature child. They're just specific needs at that developmental
Yeah.
stage.
Hmm.
We don't call a child an immature teenager. No, they're things that children need. And when I say children below 9 years old, when we call teenagers immature, and especially adolescents, it's somewhat demeaning. You know, you're taking away their worth. You're not acknowledging their wisdom, and it sets up the conversation. As the adult in the room, you're already disempowering them in the conversation. We spoke about autonomy supportive parenting, and really, for autonomy supportive parenting to happen, you have to recognize the wisdom of the other person and their desires. As every individual, we have desires. And this comes from conscious parenting as well, recognizing the sovereignhood of the individual in front of you. Now, as the adult in the room, you still have the final say per se, but it's how do you let that out bit by bit? And every kid is different. If you have 2 kids, you understand this. So it's how do you gauge it for this child and how do you gauge it for that child? But the principle is scaffolding. It's inviting them into the conversation, understanding their wants and needs, and then supporting them towards that as they start to figure themselves out.
Yeah.
I think I answered it, but I
so
can't remember the question.
I was
Go on.
asking about the mistakes that parents made. And actually, we didn't mention
Yes.
autonomy supported parenting earlier, so we do want to define that for the listener.
Yes. So the mistake is, first of all, I feel it's very disempowering when you say this person is not mature. You cut them off even before they're starting. You think
So it's like our
teenagers are...
mindset. It's like one of the mistakes you're saying is like our whole mindset about the tween time being immature, and instead maybe we want to just think of them as like having their own specific needs, just like any other phase. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. If you go into a setting and say, I'm going to have a horrible time, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I try
Or
to
if
tell
we
my
look at the
daughter that
pygmy,
all the time.
or even the Pygmalion effect, where a teacher was given 2 classes and she was told one class was low achievers and the others were high. And by the end of the school year, that's exactly how they moved, whereas they were both neutral classes.
Yeah, I remember that study.
And I'll do you one even better, Hunter. Like, there was this, I can't remember the name of the study, but they had these rats, and over the rats, they labeled them good rat, bad rat, good rat, bad rat, or smart, dumb, smart, dumb. They ran them through the maze, and the dumb rats performed slower. It's just that those were random labels, though. And this is not woo-woo, this is actually what happened. They looked back at the video, and the smart rats were actually handled better by the researchers, and it lowered their heart rate, so they were more calm as they ran through the maze. So when I say we move towards our expectations, I really do believe that.
Yeah, I believe that too. So then what kind of expectations would you encourage parents to have for their tweens?
Sure. The word parent, the etymology and the root of it, and education for that matter, means to bring forth. The way I interact with people, and specifically teenagers, is first of all, understand there's awesomeness in there. And as teachers, we create the context for that expression to happen. We work with what presents itself. You know, how might I meet what comes forth? What do I encourage? Where your focus goes, your energy flows. What am I giving praise to? What gets praised gets repeated. Am I setting the right expectations? And when those expectations aren't met, it's either one of 2 things. Either 1, they don't have the skills to do it, or 2, they don't have the support to do it. The third thing is actually they don't care about it, which is valid actually. But if they don't care about it, then that's a conversation to have. It's all a conversation to have, but you let them know you're supported in this conversation. I'm on your side.
I love that. When expectations are not met, it's either they don't have the skills to do it, they don't have the support to do it, they don't really care about it. I think that couldn't be more true. You know, that's one of the reasons why I was such a proponent of like Montessori education for my kids, because I know that they'll learn so much better if they have some autonomy, some choice, if they care about what they're doing a little bit more. If they have some buy-in and interest, that's an essential ingredient.
That goes along with self-determination theory, right? It's something that you chose, that you love to see mastery and or progress in, and then you're doing it in relation or connection with other people. Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned autonomy supported parenting. Talk about what that is.
Yeah. It's an approach to parenting. Forget how all development and how all learning happens. And that is in life, we have challenges. Oftentimes when we face those challenges, when we're kids, we don't understand that this is inherent in life. I believe that's how things move, through forces. And all a conflict is just a differing of forces. Anyhow, before getting too deep. So kids think, what's wrong with me? Autonomy supportive parenting is very close to collaborative problem solving. But what it says is, nothing's wrong with you. Let's understand this together, collaboration. You're inviting them to get their perspective because you have to meet them where they are in their head. We understand it as adults, but like you have to meet them in their language and from their relevancy. And then you say, let's come up with a solution together and an approach to this, managing it. And it's just an experiment. And if it falls short, we'll come back and we'll visit it again. When I say fall short, it's just like, yeah, let's get some data. When is it moving us towards our desires? If it's not, then let's come and do it again. And then they know. So I have my hands up for those who are listening. It's not necessarily us against them, but rather we're facing it together. And what autonomy supportive parenting, in a very short word, is just scaffolding. You're helping them towards what they want, and you're supporting them. And that's how you move somebody towards independence.
Now, I can hear the listener kind of hearing this, but saying, I have a 10-year-old, I have an 11-year-old. I want this 11-year-old to speak to me in a kind, respectful way. I want them to behave, meaning I want them to pick up their stuff when they come home. I want them to take care of some chores around the house. This all sounds wonderful, Marcus, but how does all of this communication translate into something in the real world?
Yeah, very, very good. I hear you. It translates, but setting clear expectations and boundaries, because that's actually what's coming up during this stage of life. You're letting them understand, I'm going to need you to do some things by yourself. And I could give you 2 practical examples right after I say this, because all of this is just words until we see it in action. And this is more effortful. Like it takes longer because you have to be more patient with this. And I think there also comes that understanding of when you understand parenting it's not a marathon, it's beyond a marathon. It's not a sprint, it's not a marathon. It is.
It's an ultra marathon. It's like 10 ultra marathons.
So I'll give you a more practical one from the book and then one from my own lived experience. In the book, this 10-year-old used to come in from school and used to sit down, plop down, and play video games or watch TV. And it was messing up with his homework. His mother noticed it was a problem, started that conversation with him and said, hey, what do you think we can do about this? Because this is why it's a problem. And he came up with a solution that said, maybe I enter in through the other door. And when I enter in through the other door, I have 2 choices. I can either do video games for so long and then I have to do homework for the rest of the time, or I sit down with my homework this amount of time and then I can play a little bit of video games. They tried that solution and it worked. And it doesn't happen the first time every time, okay? So to that listener who's listening, I understand that sounds idealistic. But the kid got to own his results. The mother recognized his wisdom. And not all kids are like this. I worked with kids. I get it. I understand. But that is the approach to it, right? One thing you said is, these are my words, not yours, but you said, I have this 10-year-old who's talking back. They have an attitude. Mm-hmm. One thing I like to share with my parents is all emotions are acceptable, not all behaviors. And as we start to understand their emotions and we start to talk them through it, or we come back after the snow globe has settled, to use a metaphor, it's like that's how they start to understand their inner world. And that's what we're there for. We're there to help them be introspective and understand it or make sense of it. I'll give you this one last example and then we can move on, or I'll follow your lead. I was in the classroom and somebody left the sink on. It overflowed. And the whole floor was wet and nobody was supposed to be inside the classroom during break time. Now, I have this thing in my classroom with my 5th graders. We always used to say, sounds like a you problem. And what a you problem is it's a problem you're having and I think you can solve it. It's your responsibility. I started hearing my 5th graders say this to each other, as in to say, like, I don't want to help you. I said, no, guys. If somebody asks for help or support, we can still help them. They're responsible for solving it. A you problem doesn't mean I don't want to help you. Anyhow, the floor was wet. And some girls were in the classroom. And I said, I was frustrated. Yeah. I said, guys, my job is to keep you safe. That is my job as a teacher. I'm not blaming anybody. And I said, I am upset. I said, either go outside or help me clean it up. I said, this is a me problem. I'm not asking who did it, but will you either help me or will you please go outside? And the reason I bring this up is because autonomy supportive parenting is you also living this. What I do in my framework, the Show Up framework, is I help the parent understand themselves and their needs to communicate this. It's personal development for the thing that's most relevant to them, which is their kid. And in autonomy supportive parenting, recognize your autonomy. Recognize who you are as a sovereign being and your needs and your boundaries. And when you're communicating this effectively, Your kids can see, oh yeah, no, this is what it means to be delineated, and that's all right.
So sharing that example. From what you're describing sounds to me like I would translate it into the language of like, that's like win-win problem solving, right? Like we're saying, what do you need? This is what I need. We're having a conversation about it. We're coming up with some ideas and solutions together. We're meeting each other where we are at. We're modeling, what you're describing is modeling respect, modeling an expectation that your tween is has got it together enough to be able to, and cares about you enough and all of those things to be able to participate in all of these problem solving things, and so that goes back to that sort of expectation in the beginning. What are you, what are we moving toward?
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, I understand the examples I presented sound idealistic, but when we put out solutions, of course, kids are gonna come with I get to eat popcorn all night and watch movies until 2 o'clock in the morning. Like, there's gonna be some outlandish stuff. I think the difference is, of course, yeah, we acknowledge those, we laugh at them, and we push them off. But really, what we're doing is we're telling our kids, you have a voice here.
Yeah.
It's student voice, student choice for those who come from the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And while you acknowledge that, you're affirming them in showing up in the world.
Yeah. Okay, let's take another real life example. What about for the kid who is just talking to their parent with, when we talk, take that example from earlier, with an attitude. They're being, they're being sort of mean, they're being rude, they're maybe sarcastic, maybe eye rolly. How would you coach a parent to deal with that?
Yeah. What gets mentioned gets managed. So maybe if not in the moment, don't deal with it, but acknowledge it and say, let's put a pin in this to come back to it later. I do read a lot, which is why I read your book, about 14 conversations to have before 14.
That's a book.
That's a book, sorry, excuse me. Yeah,
Okay.
Michelle Eckert. Yeah.
Okay.
So sometimes my brain just goes on and on. For a kid who has an attitude like that, I would let them know that first of all, I don't expect them to have that behavior, right? So I'm gonna throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall and let's see what sticks. One go-to phrase that I have when I'm working with kids at that age, is this the type of person you want to be? So I'm letting them understand that they're actually controlling of how they show up, right? Now, this kid might have something towards you as a parent, as a teacher, caregiver. I have to understand it's not personal, it's not permanent, and it's not pervasive. It's not in all things, maybe in this instant. With it not being personal, I understand all of this is easier said than done. But I let that person know, I don't talk to you like that. I don't treat you like that because I want to speak to your dignity. Let's come back and talk to it if emotions are high. But this cannot continue like this. And you can actually, another way to do it, another approach in communication is ABC. You acknowledge it and you accept their reasoning for it. So if things have cooled down and we're talking about it, again, you want to have briefer conversations, not longer ones. So a lot of the work that I do is actually preventative, but you're stressed. Accept it. When I say accept it, accept their understanding. They don't have the full story, but you accept their information. B is you build upon it. So you don't get defensive, but rather you build upon it of what I saw. These are my observations. And actually, this is maybe why you feel like that. Now you feel as if you're on their side. And then you challenge it with curiosity. And what you're doing is you're inviting them to have a different perspective. So when you do that, how does that make me feel, or how does it move us towards what we want together? And when I say challenge with curiosity, that's a question. Because you're not trying to tell them that they're wrong, and you're not trying to beat them down, because that might exacerbate the problem. What you're doing is actually you're setting up the context in their own mind, and then you're inviting them to a different perspective.
Yeah, I like that. Acknowledge, accept, build upon what I saw, and then curiosity, kind of get that. Mm-hmm.
In that build upon, while you are giving your information, but then you're also building upon their argument. Like, when I say that, I mean, you're saying, I get you. I understand why you feel like this.
Mm-hmm.
So you're building up their argument for them. So like they feel as if they don't have to defend something, or they're not fighting to prove something.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, you've proven it to me. I've heard you. I've listened. There's active listening. I'm wondering, in this critical thinking at the end, how could we have done this differently? Or how is this moving us towards what we want?
Mm-hmm. I can't imagine. I mean, I can, But that's kind of the language of like, I'm wondering, or how is this moving us towards what we want? Like, it
Sure.
sounds like not that authentic kind of language to me. Like, as far
Mm.
as like, it sounds like what a therapist would say.
Hmm.
But it would be, it might, I'm wondering
Hmm. Hmm.
if it might feel like to the kids that the parent is being inauthentic as they are trying out these kind of things. But
Yeah.
I'm not that, I'm just trying to sort of play devil's advocate and
Yeah.
imagine
Thank
it
you.
from the parent's point of view and from the kid's point of view. But I think what what you said before, like what gets mentioned gets managed, I think is so true because like say, a kid comes to us with an attitude, your 10-year-old starts giving you an attitude all of a sudden, for a bunch of reasons, and you just think, oh, it'll pass. And you just don't, I think that's also inauthentic to kind of, ignore it. I mean, if you had a friend who suddenly was talking to you in that way, you probably wouldn't ignore it from a friend. Or if your partner suddenly talked to you that way, you probably wouldn't ignore it from them. So the like that acknowledgement or what I saw or what I'm hearing is this, I think is really important. I mean, for me, I'm curious to see if you agree with me about this, since because some people really disagree about this. Is I believe that it's okay for our kids for us to say like, hey, when you talk to me like that, like, I feel sad. Like it
Yeah.
makes me not. I don't really want to be near you when you talk to me like that, which would be a very honest thing for me. I've said that to my daughters, and some
Hmm.
people feel like they don't want to share their feelings with their kids because they don't want to make their kids responsible for their feelings. And I understand that point of view. But on the other hand, kids can tell your feelings anyway. It's not like they're like in this hidden secret box that no one knows, right? Like we emote our
Sure.
feelings all the time in everything we say. Anyway, what would you say to that sort of response as a communication coach, Marcus?
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Really at the root of the problem of the first one, and I say problem, but you're absolutely right. When the person thinks you're being inauthentic, it won't resonate.
Mm-hmm.
It's an issue of trust. And trust is only built on authenticity. It's three things. Authenticity, it makes sense to them and they know you care about them. And you know that there's well-being. So I fully support a parent saying, "Hey, this is how this is making me feel." Because you're communicating, you're modeling to your kid, we can share our feelings. And you know what? You're not responsible for causing this feeling. You might think they are. They may have been the catalyst for it, but what you own your feelings. And this is informing me of what's going on. And I really don't like this. I need to let you know. Now, you can make a request for your kid to change. And this comes from nonviolent communication. You make a request for your kid to change. They may or may not. But you totally own your feelings because you let your kid know. I want you to express to me if I make you feel away. Because I'm here because I care about you.
Mm-hmm.
This is the thing about kids, right? This is their first game to communication. They do not communicate fairly. We have to model that for them. So I can't expect a kid to. Sometimes kids are manipulative. Sometimes kids don't. Anyhow, I'm extending it, but be authentic. Be real with your kids because that goes a
Well, no, I
long.
appreciate you saying that because sometimes, like, we look at what kids are saying, and then for the most part, kids are going about trying to meet their needs, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's kind of what's going on. And sometimes getting mom or dad to do what I want them to do is one of the ways they're meeting their needs. In general, it's not super helpful for us to imagine that our kids are manipulative, but occasionally they're human. They are, especially if they're in that sort of 10 to 10 plus range, right? Like they might have a
Yeah.
little experience with, oh, that worked out that one time or whatever. Well, yeah, I mean, I appreciate that you're sharing sort of like the range of what can happen here.
Yeah. And I think if we care about their well-being, we would set those hard boundaries to say, I can't meet those needs. Or that sounds like a you problem, whereas you are responsible for meeting that need. And I support you in doing that. Like whatever you need to meet that, I will support you in as much as I can. But I have this need over here.
Yeah, yeah. When this is, yeah, who owns the problem is such an important question to ask. Like, is this your problem? Is this my problem? When my kids come to me with a problem, a lot of times it's not my problem, and that is something that we've talked about plenty of times here on the Mindful Parenting Podcast. It's like this is sometimes things are not your problem, and having that as a mantra can help you to just have a little more, I think it can help you have a little bit more just objectivity, calm, steadiness, like, it's not my problem. I don't have to solve this problem, but I can be here for you. I can be your friend. I can be your coach, or I can be your sounding board as you go about solving this problem.
I think where a lot of people fall down is they think it's black or white also. And that's where autonomy
Mm.
supportive parenting comes in. Sometimes it is just critical thinking. Maybe it is getting their gears running of how can you solve this? And I'll give you that advice as a coach. But then I trust you. Again, that's how you build trust in them. I trust you to solve this because I know you got it.
Well, this is great. I think that, obviously we have a lot of overlap and things to talk about here, thinking about tweens and their cuckoo crazy years. And first I want you to share where people can find you. And then I wonder if is there anything that we miss that you want to share with listeners?
Yes. So marcushiggs.com, my name, that's where you can find me. And on LinkedIn is where I hang out. You'll find me other places online, but LinkedIn is where I have these conversations. What we missed out on is two things, and I'll make them very quick. The first one is growth is a stress response, right? If we hear about human development and human growth, things grow when they are stressed.
Muscles, all kinds of things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's a whole longer conversation. The thing is, when they know that stress is regular, at regular intervals, when that stress is manageable, and if that stress overextends me, I know there's support. That's when we manage stress. That's exercising. That's really what I just described to you.
Mm-hmm.
So when you know that, how can we create these pockets of stress? That's why learning is stressful for some people. But on the other end of it, it's growth. Mm-hmm. The second thing I'll say is, repair and reconnect. If you fall short of your expectations, or if you do have a rupture, to use the language of parenting, repair and reconnect, because you're made stronger in the broken places. That communicates you care, and that goes a long way. And again, that comes back to something was stressed, it was broken, you mend it back, and then we move forward.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I love that. Marcus, thank you. It's been really a pleasure to meet and talk to you, to talk about tweens. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join us here on the Mindful Parenting Podcast.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Yes, thank you.